Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first video in the Nostalgia Poisoning series. Today we are going to be talking about one of my strongest points of absolute nostalgia from my childhood, going so far back as me being a 9-year-old child, right at the dawn of video gaming, especially on the PC, be just at the end of the DOS era of video gaming. This is not the oldest game that I fell in love with, but it is amongst the most impressive, not just based upon storytelling, but how much it really molded my expectations in what a story, especially a trilogy, should be. Now, for some reference, Journeyman Project is among one of the very oldest photorealistic video games, or at least it was advertised as much. It was released in 1993, so a long time ago, a very long time ago. And my God, that's 30 years ago. Let that sink in, everybody. This video game series was also, in my opinion, up until the current day, still stands as the best storytelling involving time plot in a video game setting at all. Not because the modern games are necessarily bad, but because this game, at the time, actually didn't have the luxury of dumping a huge amount of time into their graphics, so they had to put a lot of effort into the story. And because the engine and the time and the processing power of computers reduced your capacity to interact with the world, they had to make sure that they could explain in the setting why you couldn't do as much with the environment around you. Okay? And it works very well in a time travel setting if you spend exactly 5 minutes thinking about it. They make the point in the very first game, try to fix what is wrong without changing anything, which helps a lot when you're in a system of a game that doesn't let you really touch that much, because unlike a modern first-person shooter, which all of these screenshots kind of suggest it's like, you move around in the world by those arrow buttons. They let you turn, go back, go forward. It's very reminiscent of a lot of the older RPG games where you have to move and turn and move and turn based on clicking an arrow on the actual monitor. But this game was the very first to actually go with photorealism in its 3D modeling, which is a brand new thing in that era. So, as a child, to me, I was honestly probably a little too young to play this game when I was 9. I was terrified of the robots in the Journeyman Project. I was absolutely terrified of their voices, and they still ring in my ears as an adult as things that are more terrifying than even like the voice of Darth Vader in a young child. Just that echoing, hollow sound of, I'm expecting you. And I use that to this day as a basis when I'm like running a tabletop game and I need to expound on a truly evil character and voice that. And that's what I kind of call to. Just that encounter. I think it was with Ares, the Ares robot, I think. It may have been Ares, it may have been Prometheus. No, Prometheus was the one in the NORAD base. Whichever one says I've been expecting you. But when the game, just the very first game, now there was a later version of the game called Turbo, which ran better. It was actually more of a patch than anything else. But that game by itself was still a very, very concise, very enclosed story. And that story was a very, very good one, describing the slow, trip to madness of the creator of time travel and his attempts to change history and to, in his thoughts, save us from our own mistakes. And it is an excellent story and very, very consistent throughout, as it seems as we watch Elliot Sinclair, the creator of time travel, slowly devolve into pure madness, to the point where he's willing to nuke an entire city to, quote-unquote, save ourselves. The second game, Buried in Time, is easily going to be the magnum opus for the series, because as technology improved over time, it really allowed them to play around and not only with the environments, but recreate something from actual history. In the first game, in the Journeyman project, we went to still the past, but it was science fictional areas. The only quote-unquote accurate time zone we went to was the dinosaur era, which, by the way, you could still die in exciting and creative ways in. One of the fun things about these games, at least the first two, is that there are a lot of very interesting ways to die horribly. But in the second game, instead of doing purely science fiction settings, they actually recreated some real historical places like Chateau Gaillard, Chichen Itza, and Chateau Gaillard, Chichen Itza, and Da Vinci's lab. Now, there was still a science fiction zone to go to, and of course, the places where you weren't exactly accurate. There were some fantasy elements, like going into the under tunnels of Chichen Itza. I'm sure are not actually real. At least if they are, they're not exactly the way they are described in the game. But you are still going back to these ancient places that do exist and exploring them as a time traveler. And it was a fantastic whodunit story of investigating who framed you for altering time. And then we go on to the third game, which was probably which was the apex of the technology that they were using. Unfortunately, at the time, video gaming was starting to get sophisticated enough that the style of game was being easily overshadowed by proper first-person video games. And the exploration elements were beginning to become sophisticated enough that the photorealism of the Legacy of Time, which was phenomenally beautiful and a lot of fun, really didn't, unfortunately, age well. But the story did take you to places like Atlantis and El Dorado, and also Atlantis, El Dorado, and Shangri-La. In this investigation of these mysteries to help save the world from horrible situations that are going on. I will not, spoil things too badly. If you want to play them, I highly recommend them. They are all available right now on Good Old Games. The link will be down in the description. They're pretty darn cheap. Buried in Time is, I think, $6. Same with Legacy of Time and Pegasus Prime, the director's cut remake of the first game, which looks beautiful and still has, graphical fidelity that I appreciate to this day, is for $10. Now, let's talk about the nostalgia element compared to modern gaming. Obviously, these games are heavily dated. We're talking about the first game coming out 30 years ago. It's not going to hold up to a modern photorealistic game, especially with games now that are using real environments to be used as skins and modeling for their video games. These games are absolutely dated. But the one thing that stands up the best, at least in the first and second games, is consistency of story and excellent story writing. The third game does suffer a little bit with a change of acting crew and I think a change of director, but it is still phenomenal and it's still a lot of fun, and it does wrap up the story, though I do wish there was a fourth Journeyman project game. Unfortunately, Presto Studios, the geniuses that made this game, folded Presto Studios a long time ago. Now, again, if anyone is interested in a story-driven game, and a beautiful one at that, and a series that is consistent with its story through all three, though admittedly, again, I would say Legacy of Time suffers the most because it had the most new technology that they were trying to really espouse to be the next wave in modern gaming, which really didn't pan out in the end. I highly recommend these games. If you're there for the graphics, you're going to be disappointed. If you're there for the storytelling and you're patient with the game, remember, these games were made in a time where you either went to the arcade and got your butt kicked, or you spent hours upon hours upon hours trying to figure out a puzzle on a game on a very primitive setting. So let's show it a little bit of credit and play it and enjoy it for the story that I personally loved so much. How this affected me when it comes to gaming, it really gave me a high standard for storytelling and gaming. You know, I want depth. I want to know why things are happening, but not everything has to be explained. And I want there to be some creativity. If you do something really dumb, you're going to die in extraordinary ways. One of the faults of Legacy of Time, I would say, the third game, is that they took out your ability to die horribly from your own stupid mistakes. Literally, in the very first game, if you walked too far in one direction, you would just walk off a cliff. And then it would ask you, how stupid could you possibly be just to walk off a frickin' cliff? And to be fair, they would be right in making that assessment. However, these are phenomenal games, even to this day. Obviously, they're dated, but they still have a story-writing element that, quite frankly, to this day, is not really matched, especially in time travel stories. Because time travel stories today really are crap. They spend most of their time trying to either solve story problems that the writers wrote themselves into, or they're trying absolutely desperately to have you not pay attention to how weak the writing is at all. With this game, it's strong writing from the beginning. The story is about time travel, and therefore, time travel is integral to it, and therefore, in finality, the time travel does not interfere with the story writing. Again, link is down in the description of this video to Good Old Games. Go and show these games some love. Go and show Good Old Games some love. I highly recommend them. Thank you all so much for watching this very first Nostalgia Poisoning video. I'll see you all again in the next video.